Do you ever feel like manifestation is just another thing on your to-do list that you don't have time for? Like your spiritual practice is something that you have to do? Honestly, you're not alone because I felt that way too. Something that's really changed my relationship with manifestation is blending it into my lifestyle so that no matter what I'm doing, I'm also manifesting. I call this manifestation as a lifestyle, and it's single handedly made the entire manifestation journey more enjoyable for me. And I've seen my desires show up with a lot more ease. Manifesting as a lifestyle has made manifestation go from feeling like a task to something I just naturally do because it's who I am. If you'd like to learn more about this, I've created a step by step guide for you. I'll link it in my show notes so you can check it out. You're listening to the Affirmation Addict podcast with Pyle Corley. This podcast will teach you about the power of affirmations while making manifestation easy and accessible for you in order to enhance your spiritual consciousness. Thank you so much for being here, and now it's time to get started. If you're looking for a space to navigate life's light and dark moments, I invite you to download my app, Affirm It. It's an app I crafted to help you create your spiritual practice because I know how hard it can be to manage your energy throughout all the different things life throws at us. So we celebrate the light and the dark. We're not asking you to be positive all the time. We're super, super raw, super real, and welcoming to all the feelings. And so inside of the app, I've created a ton of intentional features to help you with your spirituality. We have daily affirmations to help you stay consistent on your journey. We have guides, practices, and journaling to help you with the self-improvement. And we have guided meditations and visualizations to help you deepen your practice and connect to yourself. One of my favorite things that I've created for the app is actually guided affirmations. So it's something you listen to. It helps you effortlessly reprogram your limiting beliefs. So I invite you to download the app today. It's only $4.49 a month, and even less if you do our annual plan. Head to the show notes to download it on your phone today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Affirmation Addict podcast. My name is Pyle, and I'm so happy you're here. So this episode was inspired by, I was just writing. I actually had a different episode planned, and I was like, if I were my audience, if I wanted content, what would I want? And I always think of it that way, but I just really sat in and dropped into my heart. And so I'm really curious if this is something you all needed. I'm just going with it. I'm working on being more connected to my own intuition in my business because I know that's how I started, but I also feel like I've shifted because it's so easy to get influenced, and I've been influenced in how I should run my business, or I think the best way to operate forward is. And so I'm really trying to drop into my heart space. And so when I sat down and record this episode, I had a different topic in mind, but this is what feels important to me. It's all about freedom, because I've talked to so many of you through my workshops, through client calls, through a lot of you are my students, and we've done one-on-ones. And I feel like so many of us, including myself, like a core feeling, like you guys know feelings are important, right? We love feelings here. We celebrate all of them. But a core feeling that I feel like so many of us are seeking and trying to create is freedom. And I find that even for my own journey, I sometimes find that a little bit hard to wrap my head around. I find that in theory, it sounds beautiful. In conscious effort, it sounds nice. But when I sit down to actually reflect on how do I do that, sometimes I'm at a loss for words, and I'm at a loss for what do I actually do now? Like, okay, I know I want to feel free, but now what? So that's really where this episode is inspired from, because whether or not you are manifesting money, abundance, even love, even soulmates or a home. Ultimately, I feel like that sense of freedom from whatever it is that we're not feeling free for is, I think, a very core feeling that as humans, when we learn about manifestation, when we learn about spirituality, I do feel like that's a very core feeling that we're craving. And I think it's a really hard one to put into words. So today, I really wanted to share some tips that I do to kind of help me create more feeling and how to feel more freedom because I feel like that's one resource and one kind of answer I was never able to Google. I was never able to find on a podcast. And so I hope this one's helpful for you. Okay, so going into the 3 tips, the first one is that I actually think taking away the labels helped me feel more free. Whether it is the label of I am a wife, I am a daughter, I am a sister, whether it's those types of kind of relationship labels, whether it's the labels of I am an entrepreneur, I am a spiritual teacher, coach, I am a business owner, those career labels, the labels of like our lifestyle choices, like I'm a vegetarian, I am a morning person, I am a night person, those types of labels. Like I feel like we live our life through all of these labels, and yes, they are part of our identity, but when we make them too much of our identity, we start to lose our inner beings. We start to lose who we really are. And we are really way more than these labels. I think these labels are a very human 3D part of our world, but we are more than that. We are 4D. We are 5-dimensional. And in those spaces, labels don't really matter. You guys, I'm sure already are noticing this. Your labels don't matter, but it's kind of contradicting, right? Because you might be manifesting your dream job. So your labels of your career might be very impactful to you right now. Or you might be manifesting a soulmate. So your labels of I'm single, or I'm not in a relationship, or I always date bad guys, or my heart's always broken by girls. Like those labels, those identity-based labels might actually be holding you back a little bit. Now, why does this relate to freedom? Honestly, it's because I think the labels that we put on ourselves are almost like little shackles. Layer by layer, it's a shackle, because then we feel like we have to live up to this label. I know I feel this deeply in my business, and you guys are starting to probably see a shift where I felt this shackle of I talk about energy and spirituality. I love skincare. I love food. I love travel. And I always felt so nervous and uncomfortable to share about that stuff because I was like, that's not in my niche. That's not part of my label of I'm a manifestation or a spiritual teacher or a coach. It's not in my label. And so I felt so restricted by that. So that's what I mean by freedom, is when you take away these labels of different layers of who you are, especially in the areas you are really working on improving upon and manifesting in or growing in, these labels are actually probably holding you back and making you feel literally energetically restricted. So these labels feel like those shackles. So my invitation for you is to kind of peel away those labels. What would it be like to go out of that label? And you might be like, well, Pyle, I am this. This is who I am. Like I am single, or I am this position at a job, or I am a manifestation teacher. Like those labels, it's okay if that is a current statement of what your reality is, but that doesn't mean you have to only live like that. You're allowed to live outside of your label. You're allowed to live as if you are also a food blogger. I don't know. You're also allowed to live like you're a CEO of Google. Like you're allowed to identify as that if you want to. So your labels that you're putting on yourself might actually be restricting you, and energetically that might be kind of holding you away from freedom. Kind of making it full circle to the whole point of this podcast. The labels that we put on ourselves, and they are a way of affirmations, but it's mainly like the consciousness, right? Like, oh, I am a girl, so this is how the world works for me. I am a woman, and this is how the world works for me. That's a big one I see. And it is true. It's not rejecting it, but it's also like, well, what if it could be better? And how do you step into a more expansive version of that label? So maybe you're not able to peel away the labels. Maybe you want to expand in your label. Maybe you want to push the boundaries of your label, whichever way you want to go about it. But I invite you to detach yourself a little bit from those labels. The other thing I like to do, so tip number 2, to help me create more of a sense of freedom and feel that freedom, is I love questioning myself. I'm like, okay, you feel so unfree right now. What would be different? What do I really want? Because I like to question my sense of my lack of freedom. And it's not even mine, right? It's my subconscious. That's on a deep level. I, for some reason, don't feel free. But in reality, I'm sitting on my phone recording a podcast that's reaching thousands, if not more people. That's really cool. And that makes me feel not unfree. That makes me feel very free. Like, wow, I can do that. That's beautiful. So questioning your lack of freedom, like, or your perceived lack of freedom, and poking holes in it, poking holes in your own arguments, poking holes in your ego mind, being like, okay, ego, let's actually talk. Because oftentimes we get scared to explore that part. We get scared to, and this is kind of what shadow work is exploring the shadow thoughts that come through. Being like, wait, why is that? Why do I feel so bound? Why do I feel such a lack of freedom? Like, is it a valid argument? Most likely not. Do you feel bound by people in your life who are telling you you're not allowed to do things? I get it. That is a layer one non-freedom. But my invitation to you is, okay, they're not allowing you to. What if you go against them? What would be different? They would be upset at you. So ultimately, you're the one allowing them to take away your freedom, right? Because I know a lot of you might be students, or you might not be financially independent, or you might be living with your parents or living with a spouse. And you might not have a sense of freedom that you feel, but poke holes in that. I've done that. Like, I used to feel bound. Tom has never asked me, you're not allowed to do this. But I was like, oh, Tom would not like it if I did that. And then I was like, wait, he's never even said that. I'm just assuming and almost passing the blame to him. Like, how unfair for both of us, right? And maybe you have parents. I've had parents who, and I have parents who were like, maybe you shouldn't do this. Or are you sure they would question something I wanted? And I took that as a no. Any sort of question, any sort of kind of questioning my desires, I took as, no, I'm not allowed to have this. I took that as a no. So I encourage you to get uncomfortable. This is a very uncomfortable tip, by the way. So I wanted to warn you. This is so uncomfortable. You might be cringing as you're listening to this, like, Pyle, what are you asking me to do? So all of these bounds of like, oh, my boss would get mad, I can't do that. Okay, so what? What is the worst that's going to happen? You'll get fired. Do you trust in your ability to go get a better job? I know it's a really aggressive approach, but this has helped me move very far forward in life. This has helped me excel all of the bounds. I used to think I had to stay in my 9 to 5. I had to have a savings account. I had to have proof of concept before I started my business. I had to have all of these things, but I didn't. I had the courage to trust myself that if things didn't go the way I wanted, I would find another way. I would figure it out. I had the courage that, okay, maybe I do quit my job. And if I quit and it doesn't work, what will I do? I will go find another job. But if I wanted to take a stab at starting my own business, I believe I was worthy of doing that. And I thought it was more worth it. And that's what freedom feels like, is when you are willing to question your own shadow thoughts, your own shadow beliefs. And many of these beliefs, we are blaming them on other people. And ultimately, yes, they might have said things that restrict us, but ultimately we're also allowing them to restrict us. We're allowing them to take away a sense of freedom. So I encourage you, even if you don't take action right now, just poke holes, question it, and be like, well, what is the worst that could happen? And let yourself think through it, because it's not as bad as you think. Okay. And lastly, my last tip for you on creating more freedom is kind of the other extreme of this, is like, okay, I want this thing called freedom, right? So we already asked ourselves, what's stopping us? What is my lack of freedom? Like, now I want you to ask yourself, okay, I am free. What does that look like? How does that change? Because I think the biggest thing is so many of us don't realize how free we already are. So many of us in our own ways have a lot of freedom. We have a lot of freedom of choice. Even if it's not exactly where you want it to be, you do have that freedom. So actually, I'm going to share 4 tips with you. Tip number 3 is actually acknowledge the freedoms you do have right now. Appreciate them. Appreciate your freedom of walking around freely. Appreciate your freedom of having access to the internet, which is a wealth of knowledge and inspiration and of growth. Appreciate your freedom of being able to be on your own, of wearing your hair down, which we've seen is not a freedom for everybody. Appreciate the freedoms you have. Like, appreciate the freedom of just breathing fresh air. The fact that air isn't monetized and like to live our life. Appreciate the freedom that we have a lot of oxygen that we can just freely breathe. No one's asking us not to, right? Appreciate the freedoms you have right now, because what you appreciate will only grow. What you focus on grows. So that is tip number 3. And tip number 4, my little bonus tip, is I want you to ask yourself, what does freedom feel like? Because we say, oh, I want to feel free. I feel so bound. Okay, well, tell me the other side. Write out what that feeling is, because chances are this is going to be a very hard step, because we, 1, feel like we don't know what it is, and 2, we just think there's so much more, but actually what you have is so good. And ask yourself to explore what is freedom. And you might think of these grand kind of big ideas, like I want to be able to buy 5 Lamborghinis, or I want to be able to pick up and travel every single day. And that might be a true desire, but ask yourself, is it actually a desire for yourself or for somebody else? Is it a desire to prove something, to say that you've made it? Or is it a desire because it's actually important to you? Ask yourself, if nobody was watching, if social media didn't exist, if nobody else was involved, what would true freedom feel like? And your answer might really surprise you, and it might not be far away. You might be able to start creating that now. And that is my invitation for you, and my reminder for you is that feeling of true freedom isn't as far away as you think, because we are actually all so free right now. We have so many opportunities to feel and enjoy the freedoms that we have. And that's what I want you to work towards, and to give yourself permission to poke holes in your arguments and your ego's arguments that I'm not free. Things would be so much more free if X, Y, Z. And ask yourself, what excuses are you giving to not feel free today? Because no matter what you're on, what journey you're on, what you're trying to manifest, you are allowed to feel free from this moment forward. And that's my goal for you. That's my invite to you, is feeling more freedom today forward. And that's my invitation to you, is feeling more freedom from today, this moment forward. You're allowed to feel it right now. Like, we think that we're so unfree and life would be so much better. And yes, it might be. And I'm not asking you not to want your desires. All I'm saying is a big reason many of us want some of our desires is because we think we're going to feel more free. And I wanted this episode to be a reminder that you are free, and you can feel that now, because not only is that going to make you feel happier, but it's also going to help you get closer to your desire. So it's a win-win. So I really encourage you to take the time to do some of the things I shared and poke holes and sit and do some of that freedom work, because you are free. We are all free, and we're all able to feel that right here and right now. So I hope these tips were helpful, and I hope you feel a little more at ease. I hope your heart feels a little lighter, a little less worried, a little less tight. I hope you feel better. I hope you feel more free just listening to this, and I hope it only expands. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you and talk to you in the next episode. Bye.
I always get a ton of questions in my DMs from people asking how I can manifest X. The truth is, you can really manifest anything as long as it's for the greatest good. And if you're having trouble manifesting something right now, or you feel stuck on your journey, I have a really beautiful resource I've made for you. It's a free quiz. It's called the Manifestation Archetype Quiz. And it's something that I've created so you can find out your manifestation style to give you more clarity on your spiritual journey. After taking the quiz, you're going to receive the best resources for your specific archetype to help you attract your desires based on where you're at and what you want to create. So you can find a link to the quiz in the show notes, or just head to my website at www.affirmation-addict.com. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If this episode resonated with you, it would mean the world to me if you could rate and review the podcast and share it on your social media so I know to keep creating episodes that are inspiring you to manifest. I'm so genuinely grateful for the time we shared today, and I'd love for you to join the community by following @AffirmationAddict on Instagram. To continue diving into spirituality and manifestation, head over to my website, affirmation-addict.com. Until next time, I'm sending you so much love and so much healing energy.